Welcome back. Last week we saw verse 5, 6, and 7. So, verse 5, the summary was what should be the attitude of a person at the time of death? The answer is very simple. People say that he should think about Ishvara or God, but we try to understand the logic behind that. And what we concluded was our mind should be filled, our mind should be saturated with divine thoughts. That's what it is. And what is the result of having a mind in our final period of life? If our mental makeup is tuned towards Ishvara or the God, he or she will attain the Ishvara. It is not a Jivan Mukti, it is Krama Mukti. And what is our duty? Try to meditate or try to fill our mind with Ishvara right from now onwards. So if you really think about this chapter is not trying to highlight Krama Mukti, but this chapter is trying to highlight the importance and significance of Upasana right now. We cannot delay. We need to start the practice of contemplating Ishvara right here and now. If you think about this chapter from that angle, it fits well with the second Shatka of the Gita, because the second Shatka of the Gita mainly talk about the Lord or the Ishvara, and this chapter is mainly emphasizing Ishvara Upasana. So this was the essence of verse 5, and we saw two more verses. Verse 6, what is the nature of our future birth? What happens? Usually our future birth or our next life is determined by our karma. And what exactly is the direction of that karmic path is determined what exactly is the dominating tendencies of the mind at the time of death. So if you can fill your mind with Ishvara's thought, what Krishna said is, the best case is you can even bypass the karmic cycle and get into the Krama Mukti. And if that is not possible, even your next life karma will be skewed by the karma you have performed with Ishvara Upasana. So that is the essence of chapter 6. And then, verse 6 and verse 7 also we saw when to think about the God. This verse is very important. He concludes the topic by saying that Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Ma Manusmara. Sarveshu Kaleshu, underline, not at the time of death. So balance your duties. And then he said, Ma Manusmara Yudhyacha. It is not just think about me and sit idle. He didn't say that you retreat from the world and go to Himalayas. That's not the ask is, or that's not the guidance is. The guidance is, we talked about the example of that Shruti or the pitch in music. Whenever a musician sings, his mind will be always baselined or fixed with a reference to that Shruti. So like that, keep Ishvara in your mind always and perform your actions. That is the ideal way of living. And that is the fruit of that surrender is the attainment of the Lord. So these are very important verses. These are very much practical tips. How do we live the world, live in the world? So that's what we have seen so far, and we will continue our discussion further. So let's move on to the next verse, which is verse 8.
Vyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanya-gamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayam.
So, very important verse. How should we do that practice? Right? Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yudhyacha. How do you practice this upasana? This verse is very important. So please try to understand this verse. Abhyasa yoga yuktena. That is the first phrase. And then he said, Chetasa na anya gaminaha. Then he said, paramam purusham divyam yati partha anuchintayan. So let's try to understand the word meaning and then we will delve into the details. He say Abhyasa yoga yuktena. Abhyasa yoga, by the practice of yoga. We will see what exactly is Abhyasa yoga. One meaning, it is essentially, simply it means Upasana yoga or Dhyana yoga. This is emphasized a lot in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and this is emphasized a lot in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So you practice this yoga of meditation. Then how you need to practice that yoga of meditation, Abhyasa yoga. Chetasa na anya gaminaha. Chetasa means by the mind. How do you practice your meditation? It is by the mind. So Chetasa means by the mind. Na anya gamina. How? How do you practice this Abhyasa yoga? The mind is not deviating from the object of meditation. That is the whole idea of meditation. So we talked about, meaning we'll unfold that a little bit later. So the mind, you try to keep your mind where? Paramam Purusham Divyam. Your mind should be kept where? On the Supreme Lord of the universe. Paramam Purusham Divyam. Divyam means divine. So to that divine supreme Ishvara of the universe, your mind should be kept. So Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa. So the mind, with your mind you practice this yoga of meditation without distracting the mind. Keep your mind on the Supreme Lord, right? Na yati partha na anuchintayan, right? Yati, one attains where? The Supreme Lord. Then he say anuchintayan. Chintayan means meditating. Anuchintayan means continuously contemplating. Anu, if you add a prefix anu, means it means that which follows. So one after the other, right? Anuja means the one who followed my birth. That is why Anuja. We have seen this many times. The first verse of the Yoga Sutra talks about Anushasanam. That means that which came after the original instruction. The original instruction is Vedas, and that which is a systematic study of the Veda, that is Anushasanam. So this is what it is. So continuously engage in the practice of yoga of meditation with a mind that is not wandering or distracted. The one who meditates on the Supreme, that Purusha attains him. That is the essence of this verse. So how do you practice? Let's try to get into the details now. So the first thing is how to practice. The first point is we need to cultivate a goal of filling subconscious or unconscious mind with the divine thoughts. So you need to connect the dots, right? What Krishna said is, if your mind is filled with the divine thoughts during your final period of time, what happens? Your karmic path could be bypassed. That is one option. Even if that didn't happen, what happens? Your karmas will be skewed. So our goal of life is keep our subconscious, unconscious mind with divine thoughts. Now, there is no way for me to go and program my unconscious or subconscious directly. It can be done only through the conscious mind. So how I can program the subconscious mind, or how I can fill the subconscious or unconscious with divine thoughts. That is what the focus of this verse, right? So think about this Gita, right? And how systematically it unfolds from one verse to the other. So how can I fill my mind with divine thoughts? The answer is engage in the continuous practice of this yoga, Abhyasa yoga. You can see a qualifier. Yoga means it's only a spiritual practice, right? We have seen that. So Abhyasa yoga means it is yoga of meditation or Upasana yoga. I will define what is Abhyasa a little bit later, but it is the practice of meditation. So if you practice meditation, continuously practice meditation, and if you sustain this practice for a sufficient period of time, then what happens? Your mind will be filled with divine thoughts. So nurturing a continuous flow of one and same thought. So let's take a step back. The first goal is to make sure that your mind is controlled. Then what happens? You can practice the art of meditation. And then the third step is what? You wanted to make sure that your object of meditation is not simply your breath or something, some scenery or something like that. It is the Ishvara Pratyaya. You can take the sunset, you can take a beautiful mountain, that's all fine as long as you think about that as Ishvara. So you're taking your conventional meditation into the next level. So nurturing a continuous flow of one and same thought, which is Ishvara Pratyaya. And once you develop that skill, what happens? Your mind will be undistracted by dissimilar thoughts unrelated to Ishvara. In other words, if you start meditating upon the form of Ishvara, you can meditate on that form for a sufficient period of time. Not just 1 second or 2 seconds. You can meditate for a length of time. And once you have that skill, and if you practice that for a sufficient period of time, what happens? You can see that your mind automatically gets filled with these divine thoughts. And this eventual attainment of the divine. Because when during their final moments, their mind will be filled with the divine thoughts. And with that, what happens? You will attain Ishvara. So let's try to see a little bit more detail. So these steps are very important. There are a small illustration I want to give. So initial period, right now, if I go and sit in meditation, what happens? Let's say that the first thought is T1. What is my goal of meditation? If you can think about the goal of meditation, when I sit in the seat of meditation, what is my expectation? Let's say that I'm going to sit, close my eyes, and I'm going to think about the beautiful form of Lord Shiva. So T1 would be Lord Shiva's form. What happens T2? The next thought will be, I'll be thinking about I heard a noise outside. My neighbor is driving outside, going outside. Then I'll think, okay, I will never get vacation. T1, T2, T3, T4, totally unrelated. After T6, I realize, oh my God, I was thinking about Lord Shiva. This is called associative thinking. And sometimes you can see a waveform. This is what happens. This is the conventional state of almost all human mind. The state transition of the human thoughts are uncontrollable. It's not in my control. The mind just flows where it wants. And this is the problem. This is the problem in everywhere, right? If I want to focus my mind on my studies, but somebody says when I open my book, my mind goes somewhere else. So this is the first level. So with the practice, usually what happens? From this completely associated thinking, I get a little bit of control. T1, 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 then without my control, T2 will comes, and T3, T4, and then I realize I bring that back. That is called the meta attention. Once you improve a little bit, this is the science or the logic behind the meditation. If you understand this, the meditation becomes more clearer to you. So what happens is T1, T2, T1, T1, T1. You can see that more or less you are on T1, but occasionally the mind goes out. And once you develop that meta attention, what is going to happen? You'll be able to bring the mind back. And this is what is meditation. Because remember the verse 24 of the 6th chapter, Krishna defines, right? Beautifully the meditation. What exactly? Yato yato nischarati manaschanchalam astira. Tato tato niyamyat. Whenever the mind moves away from my object of meditation, bring it back. And that is the art of meditation. So a lot of people complain that I am not able to sustain my thought. That's okay. That is very natural. A meditation is successful when when you get the awareness that my thought is moving away. And we call it as meta attention. Meta attention means my ability to recognize that my attention has gone. That's meta attention. Once you develop that skill, you see that your meditation starts improving. And then what happens? You will be able to sustain your object of meditation T1, T1, T1 for a period of time. I'm sorry, like, actually I put white color and that may not be readable. Sorry about that. It's T1, 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 T1. But that T1 could be anything. And that T1 could be, as Herbert Benson said, like it could be a random, like words. This is what they said, right? So they took these mantras and they substitute that with some sounds. Yes, that has its own benefit, but you're trying to make something which has 10 benefit to 3 benefits. That's it. Ben, what is this Upasana yoga? Like Saguna Brahma Ishvara Upasana. You substitute that T1, right, from focusing on your breath to the Ishvara. When you substitute that, right, consistent practice of meditation for a sufficient period of time will give you that skill of meditation. And then Krishna said, you make that object of meditation me. That is very important. So first you need to start meditation. Second thing is you need to develop that. What is that? Pravaha vritti, right? That sadrishya vritti pravaha. This is how Yoga Sutra defines. The same thoughts, T1, 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 T1 will continue. And once you develop that skill, substitute that T1. If you start with T1 as Ishvara, that is well and good. If not, substitute that T1 as Ishvara, whatever is the form you think. This is what Krishna's logic. And if you practice this for a sufficient period of time, not 1 or 2 days, for a sufficient period of time, you see that your mind, unconscious mind or subconscious mind, whatever you call, technically subconscious mind is not correct, so unconscious mind, what happens? Is filled with these thoughts. The habit will be created. And this is what the technique is. Very important verse, very much practical. So please start practicing this meditation daily, 5 minutes, and you see that improvement. This I can vouch you, right? This the benefit of this practice. Just like Karma Yoga, this is a real practice which can make a lot of difference in our life. So the next thought is, so 3 things: unwavering meditation practice, then steadfast meditation, anchoring the mind to the divine, and the third one is dedicated pursuit. You have to continue this for a longer period of time. It's not that 1 or 2 days. It has to be sustained for a longer period of time. Then you will attain that supreme goal. This is very beautiful, very important. So please pay attention. That's why we are going very slow. This verse is very important. Let's continue. Before we, so that we put a small sets of lines. Avantiji had chanted this, so let's listen to that and then we can proceed. What is the theme of this verse?
In depths of the mind, a divine thought unfolds. Through Abhyasa Yoga, sheer beauty beholds. Fixated, focused on Ishvara's grace, in Upasana, dissolve into that reassuring embrace. Undistracted, the mind's meanderings cease. Dissonant thoughts gently release. With Ishvara Pratyaya springs forth the consecrated stream, awakening hearts to the eternal plea. With steady practice, the mind is led to the abode of the sacred thread. Through the art of dhyana, the path unfolds, attaining the divine that ultimately only the most sincere behold.
If you read this, you will get the essence of this verse, especially the undistracted minds entering the seas, right? And then what happens? With Ishvara Pratyaya. Ishvara Pratyaya is a technical term in Sanskrit, which means that is the alambana of meditation. So this is, if Sanskrit is difficult, you can follow this. Because some people find, meaning we're telling you like, they forget Sanskrit. It comes to English. So let's move on. Just a reference from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Patanjali Yoga Sutra verse 13 and 14 beautifully defines what exactly is the Abhyasa. So since we said Abhyasa Yoga, I thought better to just quote that. So Patanjali tells what? Tatra sthito yajno abhyasaha. So abhyasa is the effort for bringing firmly established in that mind, stable state of mind to chitta vritti nirodha. That exactly resonates with Krishna's definition. Tatra sthito yajno abhyasaha. And then Patanjali clarifies. He say, Tatu dirghakala nairantarika satkara sevita dridhabhumi. So this practice is not just one day. So this practice or abhyasa, it will be firmly grounded, sthita bhumi, when it has been cultivated for a sufficient period of time or long time. The word used is dirghakala. And then he said nairantarika. I can say that I practice meditation for 5 years. How many times? I did that 5 years back, and 4 years, meaning I started doing that. No, he said nairantarika. So two keywords, dirghakala and nairantarika. Brilliant sutra. Dirghakala nairantarika. This is the practice. The practice of meditation has to be there. So Patanjali's meditation, the Yoga Sutra, is the most systematic guide for meditation. So these sutras, I thought it is appropriate here. So that's what the essence of this verse is. Sanjay, if you got the verse, you can chant one more time, because this verse is so important.
Sure. Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanya-gamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan.
Chetasa na anya-gamina, right? So the dissimilar thought patterns will not be there. So think about that T1, 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 T1. Then T1 should be what? Paramam Purusham Divyam. So T1 has to be that supreme divine. So in that poetry, that's exactly what came out. So this is very important. So that's the essence of verse 8. So now we can go to verse 9. Sanjay, you can chant.
Sure. Kavim Puranam Anusashitaram Anoraniyam Samanusmaridhyah Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasas Parastat.
Again, beautiful verse. This needs a lot of explanation. So what happens is, Krishna said, you meditate upon me, right? You meditate upon Ishvara. What is the nature of that Ishvara you want to meditate? He wants to give the description of that supreme meditated by Upasaka. Now there could be some confusion here. So we will clarify that. So let's see the literal meaning. He says Kavi. We are going to see the meaning of each one. What is the nature of that Ishvara? The first one is Kavi. Literal meaning is the one who contemplates, but that's not the meaning here. So we will see that. Purana. Purana means the ancient. Anushasitaram. Then the one, we will see that one by one in detail. Then Anushasitaram. Then the next word is Anuraniyam. Anuyam. Then, so Anusmarit. Then Sarvasya Dhataram. Achintayam. Arupam. Aditya Varnam. Tamasas Parastai. This is the verse. So I'm not going to translate that into English. Let's go in detail. But before we jump into that, we need to clarify something. So that clarification requires some explanation. So let's start with that. So the first point is, what should be your object of meditation? See, connect with the previous verse. Very important, right? So we need to keep that clarity always. So what should be the object of meditation? It is the Ishvara. Paramam Purusham. That is the definition given in the previous chapter. So now how do I meditate that Paramam Purusham? Because for me to meditate, I need a form. And what is the problem with the Paramam Purusham? It is formless. This is the challenge. Shankaracharya spends some time here. He explains, you can symbolize. See, there are two aspects of Ishvara. The real nature of the Ishvara is Nirgunam. There is no form. Because the God is beyond all forms, all names, all attributes. It is impossible for me to comprehend and meditate upon Ishvara. So what is the solution? You use a symbol. You can choose a form or a symbol to represent that divine. And in this particular verse, when Krishna talks about Kavim Puranam, all those verses, what he meant here is, you can choose a form of Ishvara and then you can meditate upon that symbol. And Shankara clarifies in that point. I just translated his commentary only. He said there could be multiple symbols. You can meditate that Ishvara in the form of Lord Shiva, or in the form of Lord Vishnu, or in the form of Muruga, or in the form of Devi or Ayyappa, or in the form of Om. It doesn't matter. But the symbols are many, but the Ishvara is single. Right? So the verse 8 highlights two aspects of Ishvara. Paramam Purusham, supreme, and Purusha. What is Purusha? We saw. One is all-pervading, or that which fills everything, or that which resides in the form of sun. So there are several meanings. And in this verse, there are a set of additional attributes, additional descriptions of that Ishvara, that infinite Ishvara, which can be represented, which can be visualized through a symbol is given. So we need to connect this Saguna and this Nirguna, because if you really read the description provided by Krishna, it is Nirguna. So you may think, how am I going to meditate on that? That is going to confuse. So Shankara clarifies in his commentary, with this approach, you have to meditate. So one modern example is what? How do I pay respect to my country? By saluting the flag. That beautiful flag you host on July 4th or August 15th. We know that cannot comprehend, or that cannot cover this length and the breadth and the scope and the depth of my country, USA or India. But I use that as a symbol, that as a means to pay my respect to my country. This is very important. So that is the difference between like Saguna Ishvara and Nirguna Ishvara. So what, I'm paraphrasing it, it is not Shankara's exact word. Imagine that there is a lamp sitting here. And imagine that you cover that lamp with a cardboard box. On one side, you put a circle. On the other side, you put a triangle. And the third side, you put a square. And the fourth side, put a star. Person from east is going to say, this lamp is a star shape. The person from west side will say what? This lamp is a circle. The person from north will say, no, it is a triangle. And the person from the other side will say it is a circle, or whatever it is. What exactly is the lamp? The circle is in the lamp. It is the lamp that is seen as circle. So the lamp is not circle. but I prefer to see that lamp as a circle. Lord is not in the form of Lord Shiva, but I prefer to see God in the form of Shiva. That's fine. This is very important. This is where the form comes in. So Krishna, Shiva, Muruga, Devi, and you bring all the foreign forms of divine, that's all fine. You can call it as Jehovah, you can call it as Buddha state of consciousness, you can call it as Allah, it doesn't matter. The God is only one, and that God can be seen in many forms. It is up to me to choose the way I want to see the God. Because every form is God. You can see God in any form. Like that's why the folk tales are there. In Kerala, they say like one priest, actually there was a tribal person who wanted to worship God. So he went to a priest and asked this priest, oh, how can he knows, I know the Vedic rituals and worships, and his worship is very primitive. He said the God is in the form of a bull. And this tribal person started visualizing the God in the form of a bull. And what happened, the story says, like they could not lift the Vigraha of the Lord from the Sanctum Sanctorum. Because this tribal person, that the horn is stuck there. Because his visualization was so powerful, the God manifested in that form. It's just a story, but it carries a message. The forms are not for God, the forms are for me. So when I feel like a divine father needs, you have Lord Shiva. When you want a friend, you have Lord Krishna. When you need a powerful warrior who can remove any obstacle in front of you, that is Subramanya or Muruga. And sometimes you need to see that divine motherly love. You have the divine mother. Our culture is so good. Have you ever thought, like outside of our culture, you don't see any feminine aspect of the God. Everywhere it is male. It can be male, but it can be female also. That's very important. So the gender, the color, the shape, the form, what exact species you belong to, all are our choice. Imagine if the snake has a mind, and if this, imagine, meaning that clause is always there. If that snake has a mind, if the snake can visualize a God, what would be the visualization? It will be another snake. So this is important. Let's not bring our human constraints and human limitation into the nature of God. Who is limiting God? It is kind of these organized religions practices. They put some framework and allow you to see the God only through that framework. And that is where you fight between Shiva and Vishnu. And that is where you fight with different gods. In fact, there is no fight between Shiva and Vishnu. You know that, right? So, I always quote this. In Vishnu Sahasranama, there is a verse. Sarva Sharva Shiva Sthanam. In Vishnu Sahasranama, there is a word called Shiva. And in Shiva Sahasranama, there is a word called Vishnu. So this is, both are there. So the fight is human. And you can see this fight even in 21st century now in America. So that's unbelievable. Okay, so this, with that introduction, we can move. So this verse, Shankara spends some time. You need to understand the integration of Saguna and Nirguna aspect in worship. So let's take a few minutes and try to understand this. So what happens is the practice of our scriptures, right? Every sadhana, that is what it acknowledges the idea of Saguna Upasaka, where a devotee worship a deity with specific attributes. It could be Shiva. Shiva has specific attributes, right? He has the Tripund, he has Ganga, he has his Jeta, he has his snakes. Our Vishnu, he has the Shankha, Chakra, Gata, and Lotus, all that is there. So that's fine. So there is difference between the attribute picturized or shown for Shiva versus Vishnu. But it is important to recognize that there is an underlying formless aspect of the Supreme, which is called Nirguna Brahma or Ishvara, Nirguna Ishvara. So what happens is, what our masters have cleverly did is, even in the descriptions of this Saguna Ishvara, certain words are used to highlight the formless aspect of that Supreme. Have you ever thought of that? I know that I'm just deviating a little bit, but this is very important because Krishna gave a set of attributes which are formless and tried to do the Saguna Upasana. Why? That is what we are explaining now. One example. One popular prayer of Krishna is what? Have you heard of this prayer? Satchidananda Rupaya Vishwotpatyadi Hetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Sri Krishnaya Vayam Mama. Everybody chants. What is the first name of Krishna? Satchidananda Rupaya. What is that? Sat, existence of the universe. Is there any form for that? Absolutely no. Right? Then what? Chit, consciousness, any form. Then Ananda, contentment. So Krishna is called as Satchidananda. Then Vishnu Sahasranama, Aprameya. What is Aprameya? One cannot be objectified. You cannot, Prameya means you cannot put as an object of your thoughts. That is formless. Right? Lalita Sahasranama has 10 or hundreds of names which are formless. So that is cleverly planted to lead us to that next direction. This is the strategy. So please understand that, right? So then what happens? In the descriptions of the deity, like certain words are used to highlight this formless aspect of the Supreme, right? These words are intentionally included to gradually familiarize the devotee with the understanding of the formless aspect of the Ishvara. And initially the devotee may not fully comprehend the significance of these words. But slowly, if you practice these type of sadhanas, this will gradually expand their understanding. And the words like Satchidananda is complementarily used for meaning to call Krishna. Then, so by cleverly incorporating both the Saguna and Nirguna aspect in the worship and practice, the seekers are guided eventually towards that Nirguna aspect of the Ishvara. So these are little bit of introduction. I'm sorry if it is complicated, but it is not complicated in fact. If you understand this, so the real underlying reality is the formless God. And for my convenience, for my ease of worship, I attribute a form. But even our culture names that form, the Saguna Ishvara, or the God with a form, with that Nirguna name. Cleverly. I don't know whether you thought about this, but this is the brilliance of the Jagat Guru Shankaracharya. This is why we need teachers like him, who connects the dots and who make sure that we understand why we do what we are doing. So this is very important. Now let's go to each verse. So I don't know, we cannot finish everything, but at least we will finish 3 or 4 names. And I want to give some time to Avanti ji and also play her video and ask her to share her experience also with that program. Everybody wanted that. So let's start with first word, Kavi. Kavi literally means Krantadarshi. What is Krantadarshi? One who can see things beyond the usual means of perception. Typically, whom do you call as a Kavi? Poet. Why? Same meaning. One point, saw a flower falling down. That triggered a huge poetry. If I see a flower falling down, what happens? Nothing. When the apple fall on Newton's head or nearby, it triggered something in him. He saw something. If it was on my head, I would have just eaten the apple and gone away. But he saw something which I am not able to see. So these are a limited extent. So the kavis can be somebody who can see something which normal people cannot see. But who is the greatest kavi? The one who can see the past, the one who can see the future, one who can transcend the space and time, the omniscient, the all-knowing being. That is the absolute, the highest kavi. That is why it is Ishvara, because he has the complete knowledge. Right? This is very important. That is why kavi. So these are all the definitions or unveiling the nature of Ishvara. Each one of this is a pointer only. When you think about this, this can be used for both Nididhyasana and meditation. When you use this for Nididhyasana, you are trying to contemplate upon the meaning of that, right? When you use this for like Upasana, you do it in a different way. You contemplate upon the nature of Vishnu and you imagine Vishnu as a kavi. That's it. So try to understand that difference. Second one is Purana. Purana means what? The most ancient one. And still it's fresh. Ancient and yet fresh is Purana. The most ancient one. The one without a beginning. Preceding the concept of time itself. Because the time itself is born out of him. Even the Lord of time, Mahakal. This is what it is. Next is Anushasitaram. Shasana means what? Instruction or control. Anushasana means one who enforces the governance around the entire cosmology, cosmic laws. The whole cosmic laws are governed by the cosmic order, and that is Ishvara. Then the next word is Anuraniya. Anu means typically atom. The smallest particle of a matter, atom. You have that in Vaisheshika, another school or another darshana of our Vedic system. Maharshi Kanada, he talks about Paramanu, Rinanu, all those things. Negative particle, positive particle, atom, everything. It's there in our Vaisheshika system. And what is Anuraniya? Meaning, Anu is usually the subtlest or smallest particle. Something smaller than that. Something subtler than the subtlest is the Anuraniya. I cannot grasp it. Even atom I cannot grasp it. So, how can I grasp it? Everything in the universe is made up of that, and yet, see, the atom lies in every particle we see. I may recognize a TV, but I don't see the atoms underlying that. So what about you talk about something even subtler than atom? Because that's the one gives existence to everything in this universe. That is Anuraniya. So we covered 4 names. 4 more we need to cover. I'm sorry, I couldn't even cover 2 verses, but these verses are like preloaded with a lot of information. These are sutra verses which needs to be unpacked and expanded.